John, are we ready?
We're ready.
It is 6:30. We'll call our Little Falls City Council special work session of December 6th to order. We do have a quorum. We're all here. Public forum. Individuals may address the City Council about items on the agenda or not included on the agenda. Speakers are required to state their name and address for the council record and limit the remarks to 3 minutes or less. Speakers are requested to frame their comments around items that fall within the authority of the City Council. Generally, the City Council will not take official action on the items discussed at this time, but may place the item on file, take the matter under advisement, refer the matter to a staff or a committee for a future report, or direct the matter to be placed on an upcoming agenda. Does anyone wish to speak? Bill discussion. Questions with the bills?
I have a question. What happened to the windows at the Rosenmeyer house? There was $700 in window replacement?
There were some broken windows. Some of them had been broken for a while, and a couple others were broke while Chris was out. No vandals, anything like that, just old windows that cracked that she had replaced.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. President, I have a question. There's a bill in there on page 31, $62,500 for Arizona refuse truck.
That's a loan the EDA is making to Bob Lemire Roll-Offs Refuse and Recycling. That's a down payment.
That'll be used for their recycling service.
So I guess kind of confusing. We go through 2 RFPs and all the process along with that, and now we're, with nothing being said on any of that, now we're approving a loan for something that was looked at, approved, and they couldn't even do their job if they don't have a truck, or that's what, I don't understand what's going on here.
Well, it's the one, Council President, if I may.
Yes, please.
The truck, the loan was through the EDA. I mean, the council still confirms purchases, but the loan had to go before the EDA. So the members of the EDA heard the presentation for approving that loan and the financing agreement. 2, if even on the proposal, if they didn't have the equipment in hand, like they wouldn't and gotten the proposal. It wasn't a requirement of them to have equipment to do the service in advance of the proposal. They researched what the cost would be, found out, estimated what their debt service would be on that vehicle, and built that into the price for what they're providing the service for. We also have the same agreement with this hauler vendor for their truck that they use on the garbage side as well. So it's not something that's new to us, and it's a pretty insured payback, since we're the ones paying them, and we're taking the payment out of the other payment that we would otherwise be giving to them. It wasn't a part of the RFP process, but that's, to me, was not the relevant factor in the selection.
Mr. President, so it's still kind of confusing. They didn't realize that they were going to need a truck during this process, and now it's already, it seems to me we kind of went through this about a year ago when a purchase was made without the prior approval that was done through another
Excuse me, Mr. Storley. We're not. The city isn't purchasing the vehicle. We're paying. We're giving out a loan through our Economic Development Authority, which we have the authority to do, to a business to purchase the truck. The city doesn't own the truck. The Bob Lemire Roll-Off Refuse and Recycling owns the truck. We have just lend them the money through our Economic Development Authority, which we have statutory authority to do. We have loans to numerous businesses and industry throughout our community in order to operate this, to buy this truck in order to operate the contract.
Mr. President, the question is, what I don't understand is why this is being brought before us now when I cannot believe that awarding that RFP, that this wasn't something that should have been thought about and looked at beforehand.
Why would they buy a truck before they get the contract?
I'm not saying they'd have to, but why wouldn't they bring it up to let us know this is something that they're going to be looking at?
Because they're not related. One is a request for proposal to get the business, and the other is a loan through the EDA to support a local business like they do with multiple other businesses.
That's what EDA is for, local businesses.
Any other questions with the bills? Consent agenda item discussion. I just have a question. What's the fireworks, or is it just the Lions winter
Yes.
fireworks?
Yes.
No
Yep.
special thing?
Yeah.
Any other consent agenda questions? Council information only items, levy and budget review. John?
Thank you, Council President. Give me a second, I'll get my documents up here. I'll do this one first. Okay, so, as every year, of course, we have our budget process. We have to operate on a calendar year per our statute, or per our charter, and we, back in September, approved the preliminary levy at a 15.45% increase. Always the conversation that comes up is why so high? Just for information for everybody is that sets the ceiling at which we can't exceed for levy requests. So we put in is pretty much the max request that we have. We have our public works and engineering departments, of which we do use a lot to help with projects and other departmental utilization. So, but we budget 100% of their staff time at that time when we do the preliminary levy. So it is something that we know, we have built-in mechanisms that we know we're not going to go over that. We're not going to need to go over that in most circumstances. If you recall last year, we had a lot of conversation about a lot of unknowns in terms of revenue and LGA in particular, because we didn't know where the state was going to be at. But all things considered, since a year ago, things have been actually very, very good for us fiscally. We've had a lot of good revenue progress. I think one aspect is actually in building permits. That's a good gauge to kind of show where we sit in terms of activity and building going on in our community. And we had a really good year this year on that front. So. So that building permit revenue was up to is projected to be about 87,000 for this year, maybe 89. So we're kind of getting close to back where we were in 2019, which actually exceeded 100,000. So that was an exceptionally busy year. But having that activity is a really good indicator that things are going well in our community in terms of outlook on the future. So the biggest thing that we have in terms of an overall cost in our community or in our city organizations is going to be in personnel, the wages and benefits that we have for the employees. But we are a service organization. We provide a lot of different services to the community in terms of the public safety that we have with our police department and fire department, that public works functions with our streets engineering, parks and recreation, the water and wastewater, storm sewer, those various services. Those things are really personnel driven once those infrastructure things are in place. So it's really on the basis that given year after year after year is going to be kind of our number one thing. Another just informational piece is we operate 3 kind of separate funds our general fund, our special revenue funds, and our enterprise funds. As you know, the enterprise funds are more business associated. Those operate as revenue in from user fees and monthly base charges for water and wastewater, the garbage and recycling, and the stormwater. So they tend to operate more as cash in, cash out for those consumption and collections, mostly on the water side, and then the use that we have on the garbage and recycling with our contracted haulers. So those should be, financing themselves, and they actually really do. They do very well. We've done, I would say, credit to council 6 years ago when I first came in here, saw the vision of where we needed to be in terms of rate structure, especially with the pending wastewater treatment plant project. I knew that we had to make some changes in order to make sure that these departments are fiscally sustainable, and did so. And to this date, they're doing very well. I am coming to you with this budget on that side with some rate increases on the water front, nothing on the sewer front, because those are in place. We do have the debt service payments in the plans for our PFA loan for the major the wastewater treatment plant renovation, and the cash flow. So that is, we did what I kind of projected and we talked about 6 years ago, and where things might be. Thanks in large part to PFA kind of extending out our debt service on that plant out 30 years. So that really helped us. It aligned with where our rate structure was to fill that project, as well as the $8 million grants that we got to help offset the build. So that was really important. But on the waterfront, we have a 50-year-old water treatment plant. We talked about this in the summer. There's a lot of needs that are coming up on that front, and we experienced a severe drought this summer, and kind of saw some of the impacts in terms of water consumption and stress that put on the plant. So we know that there's additional improvements and things that we really need to start looking at, and start taking the opportunity to make some investments and repairs on that front. So there are a number of different projects that we talked about, that we want to make those investments for and build up that revenue so that we can pay that off. And hopefully, in future years, not everything could be done with just cash that we've built up in reserves. But if we can limit our bonding on that side, I think that serves us really great for the day that we probably are going to have some sort of major plant renovation. But hopefully that's not for a few more years. So we do have some rate increases in terms of the water on the water side, but nothing on the sewer. So we're trying to offset that. The other piece on the enterprise that is going up because of the recycling RFP that went out, and the switch to a single stream recycling, that is looking at a 75-cent increase on the monthly usage fee, and then a 50% increase on the administration side, and that's to offset the purchase of the carts, which I will say are going to start being delivered tomorrow.
Hey.
The garbage haulers, met with them a couple weeks ago, and they have experienced, like a lot of people, the effects of inflation in the operation of the trucks. Fuel has gone up pretty high since the beginning of the year, so they are asking for a 4% increase to the rate structure for all the rates across the board. So where that lands in terms of, if you're a 64-gallon, it goes from $16.47 to $17.12. So back to the water. These are relatively kind of large percentage-based increases, looking at increasing the base rate for water to 70 cents, or by 70 cents to $14.76. So residential customers, it's not going to be a huge impact. What you'd see is 70 cents on your bill each month for your base charge, but we do have what's in place as the multiplier effect. So the larger the meter, the more multipliers that are attached to your monthly base charge. That's really in response to you have the capacity to have this demand, so that it costs a lot more to bring in an 8-inch line than it does to, bring in a residential 5/8 meter. So that really justifies, the reason why we do that. I would say we have one 8-inch customer, and when they are up in full running capacity, the $944 that they would see for a base charge is going to be minuscule relative to the total overall impact in terms of consumption. They're going to use tens of thousands of dollars worth of water in a given month. Then, so that nearly $50 increase per month is not going to be a substantial impact or hardship on them for that rate. On the consumption side, looking at starting at 11 cents on the 1,000 gallons and relatively increasing that up as you go. So, typically what we see on average is residential households use about 5,000 gallons. Some obviously less, some certainly more, but right around that 5,000 is what we see as an average. So that's what we use as a gauge. So between the base charge and that consumption increase, what they would see likely on a monthly bill is going to be about $1.30 increase to that monthly charge. So in the end, it's not a huge sums per month, but I'd rather see us make some incremental moves in this direction than do what we had to do 5-6 years ago with the sewer and going up $5 a month just on the base charge to accommodate some of those rate increases. So that to me helps us, puts us in a really good position where we can handle these large scale projects and do the ones that we can without having to go out and look for debt service and look for borrowing. So to that end, we see the increase in that department, that budget cost going up, and that's really going to be driven mostly by those investments in the capital side. That for us was probably one of the largest capital improvement requests. So I'm going to jump into where we have that and just kind of go over some of the plans. Not everything in here is directly going to be paid for in 1 year, but some of them may have to be a debt service issue. So like the river crossing is something that we talked about, really necessary to help the overall infrastructure in our distribution system, keeping that loop in place so we're not ending up with these dead ends, not getting stagnant water, we're not getting water hammers, which is really stressful on the infrastructure in the system, to looking at that and making sure that that's in place so that we can keep that distribution system really working to its optimal level. Another aspect is new well infrastructure. So we do have we do have an opportunity, and we have been exploring, at least from the park board level, acquiring some land that potentially has the opportunity to explore and do some well infrastructure for expanded wells outside of what we have at City Hall right now. There's a couple items, so this was probably one of those departments last year that we were concerned about. We knew we had requests, but we offset a lot of those. Some of these things, you see out in future years that we're going to have some major potential expenses. So it's something that we want to start making sure that we're making these investments. So to me, the water department is really one of those that is going to need our next kind of attention in terms of raising that revenue so that we can do what we can without having to borrow for it when we don't have to borrow for it. So then special revenue fund, those are our HRA and EDA. They operate with their own levy capacity, so their levy is actually set to a cap that's a certain percentage of the total market valuation in our community, not like the general fund. We actually look at the net tax capacity and you multiply that by a rate. So on that front, we're projecting the HRA levy to be, no, that's not all of it. So the HRA levy was going to be 101,000. That actually came down a little bit from our earlier estimates. We were looking at something around closer to 105,000 eligible, as well as that on the EDA. And the EDA, we're lowering it down to 99. Now, in both funds, lowering those isn't going to be impactful to having to offset operating expenses for those funds. That's adequate enough. In the past, the levying the full amounts for EDA was so that we could build up some loan capacity to give out loans on using those dollars as local dollars. We've done really well with that over the years, and we have a pretty good fund built up on that front. We also have what are called state EDA dollars and federal EDA dollars, and that loan pool together is well over $1 million. So we have some, but it comes with some restrictions. There's some limitations to what we can spend that money on. So in the past, we have one real major expense left in our EDA on an annual basis, and that's that offset, that tax abatement that we have for Wabash of $50,000, and that will still extend, I think, into 2026. I think it was a 9-year, started in 2017.
I think that's right.
Yeah, somewhere around there. So we're almost halfway through that. That was built on the basis of helping to offset investment in Wabash taking over the Larson Boat Plant facility, and I think has really been working out very well for everybody in play on that front. But that to its extent is kind of the biggest chunk of funds that come out. We actually get some lease payments still from Inez in the West Side Industrial Park, so that's where you see those additional revenues coming up. But so really we can put to work, I think in the future years, some more capacity for what those EDA levy dollars can do. The last two items in the special revenue fund are the Parks and Recreation. That's the biggest item. That has just about almost $700,000 of the total funds. But for the most part, the Parks and Recreation budget, their revenue comes from a transfer from the general fund into that fund. Actually, $744,000 is what we're projecting for 2022. But there is in that some of the capital improvements. So the area that we've been making some investments over the past few years have been in the splash pad and the band shell. Within this budget, there is $100,000 for each item that's set aside into that capital improvement fund for those items. The rest of the big bulk of the payments in Parks and Recreation are the just payroll in general for the 3 park staff, and then the maintenance of the ball fields, ice rinks, and all of the parks, all the costs that go associated with that. On the zoo side, part of our agreements that we've had in the past with operating the zoo is that we can make a contribution towards their operating expense, so that I believe their requested amount was similar to last year.
It was the same.
The same,
Yeah.
at $175,000. So then the last in the special revenue is the airport, and I'm just pleased to talk about the airport in this instance, because with the completion of the Crosswind runway and Lakes Area Aviation kind of setting up shop out there and operating a lot, we've seen airplane fuel consumption and sales really go up a lot. So we're seeing activity and utilization of that airport, and now with the Crosswind runway being in place, that is really looking good. So that's operated as a joint powers agreement, but with the county. So the county and city jointly own that, and we contract with Tom Olson to do the management for the airport for us. So and it's not a huge budget, but it's something that certainly has the capacity and serving our community, and it's a good asset for us to have. But we have really it's been pleasing to see the utilization of that fuel, and having a business operating out there is great, because it's more activity, it's more attention and to that airport, and more people that know it's there, and more capacity for us to to use it to the benefit that it has for our community. So finally, the last item, of course, is our general fund, and that's, pretty much the all-encompassing for everything. A lot of different departments that operate in that, from, the police department and fire to our engineering and public works, and then our administration, and then all of the other ancillary things like planning and zoning and the mayor and council departments. We do now fund separately, account for our IT services, the accounting and auditing, our city attorney. So to try to keep track of that and keep it more transparent in terms of what money is going in and out from those funds. And then lastly, the ends with the transfers out that we make, and those are really towards those capital improvements, investments into the equipment that we have, as well as some assets that we have for the community. So, and then that major Parks and Rec transfer I mentioned earlier. So, last year, one of the big debates we were having was, well, do we feel confident in the revenue that we have coming in, especially for the LGA side? And by the time we did get to this meeting last year, we really did feel confident in that, and we sustained that street improvement. So that's the maintenance. On the maintenance side, that's not rebuilding the full streets. That's not doing the projects that we do, but that's the cracked ceiling and microsurfacing work that we do on the streets. So you saw that this year we did on 6th Street. So that's to extend the longevity of that roadway, because we know it's more cost effective for us to maintain that road than to wait for it to completely deteriorate, so that we'd have to do a full depth reconstruct. On the equipment side, that's the equipment investments that we have, and everything except for, or with some exception, the fire department, they operate separately on their own, that we kind of account for their fire equipment budget separately because of our contract relationship with the townships and Fort Ripley. So we do keep some of that separate, but we have made some additional investments in that equipment fund, and those that are above and beyond $85,000, then we as the city will pay for that, or budget for that as a whole. So there's that in place this year, because one of the bigger ticket items that is in need of replacement are the SCBA's, self-contained breathing apparatus for our firefighters, and that's something that just the previous ones are at the end of their useful life, and so we need to make these investments in a new one. But as you recall, we had the grant application this year. Unfortunately, we didn't receive it, but we have put in again for that grant application. So Chief Seelan is working on that. So it's one of those items that it's a pretty competitive process, and we just got to keep trying. If that comes in, that's great for us, because then that's money that we can put to use and invest in other things if needed. So breaking it down, again, the biggest costs that we have in the general fund is personnel. And then one of the items that we've really noticed this year, and we talked about a few weeks ago, has been on work comp. We had kind of a double whammy of factors that hit us this year in terms of work comp. We had a number of different claims made from employees towards that work comp issue, so that affect our experience rating. And then globally, which I'm calling globally, but it's for the entire state of Minnesota, the League of Minnesota Cities Trust, which insures most of the cities in the state of Minnesota for its work comp, they've been seeing a lot of additional claims coming into that, and a number of them are related to these PTSD claims that now can have the opportunity to look back and go on for extended period of times for those claims. So they're seeing an increase in that. So that's kind of that two-factor hit for us, is our experience went up this year, and we're going to see the continued effect of that global statewide impact to the work comp system. So that's where that rate kind of really skyrocketed on us and went up, more than 13% over what we had budgeted for from the previous year. So hopefully it can stabilize. I hope on the experience side that our claims don't continue to go up and drive that factor, but the league, Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, is saying that they're going to see those claims kind of continue to increase and have a potential to impact the rate. This is not a contract year, so we did not have any new contract negotiations from the union groups, but in our past contract negotiation, we did have a 3% increase as a overall wage adjustment to this upcoming year. And if you would have said at this point when we were doing negotiations last year, if 3% would have been I'd feel really good about, I would probably said no. I would have been, that's okay. With 3% seems to be pretty fair for what we've had. But with inflation exceeding 3, it's fortunate for us that we have that in place in terms of giving us some stability in terms of our budget. But that said, inflation is going to be impactful for everybody, and certainly for all city staff that are impacted by it. And I think we're going to see some requests coming out in the contract negotiations next year that are going to be reflective of that inflation going up for everybody. So bottom line, after all of that information, trying to be more transparent about what it is that are really impacting us. We're still seeing market valuations go up. The tax capacity, the net tax capacity, which is what I alluded to as the factor that we use to calculate out the tax rate, is increasing. That we had our truth and taxation statements came out last month. I was able to reverse calculate where they estimated that, and I think that was based on some calculations they had in August. And that was we're at 6.3 million for it, and we got released some information from the county saying their preliminary estimates are putting it closer to 6.5 million, which is really good in terms of a lot of things, because it tells us a couple things are happening. One, sales have increased over the past year, so September of this year to September of last year, sales, overall sales of the valuation are higher than what the previously assessed values were. So what does that mean? That means what the tax assessors put on as a valuation, most properties sold higher than that. It also means that we've seen growth in taxable income, so that means new buildings, that means improvements to buildings, that means this construction season that we saw really big in 2019 is finally completed, and we're starting to see some of the effects of that added valuation coming into our total net tax capacity, which is really good, because those bigger scale investments really help everybody else in the median household valuations, helps offset some of what they're experiencing in terms of that overall increase. So, with all of the things I talked about, the impacts to the general fund, the investments that we have on the capital improvement side, this budget has a request for levy of $4,088,060. 1.1 million of that is dedicated towards debt service. That adequately covers our debt service, but we also want to be able to pay off some existing debt and have that capacity built into our budget for future years when we do know we have big projects like 4th Street. I would have Greg tell you about what that estimated cost is, but I don't want to knock you out of your chairs. In the end, I think 5.84% is a very acceptable number. I've seen proposals from a lot of different communities. I haven't seen much of anything come in under 3 for similarly sized communities like us. I'm calling the city administrator in Baxter. We were exchanging messages today, and they're at around 6% for their levy increase for this year. But one of the things I know we like to talk about and we like to have the opportunities to see what might that impact be if we could bring that cost down. And as I said, our splash pad band shell allocations are $100,000 for each of them, so it's $200,000 total. What might it take for us to get to a zero impact? And if you see, it's probably a little small for you guys, but everybody else, if you see that where we are with 4.08, We were at 3.86 last year. If we took out just the band shell splash pad, not saying we do that, or it's your decision, but then you would get pretty close to that zero number, 225,000 from where we are today, with what was presented would get us to zero. Now, that said, that it would be a huge benefit because the tax rate, even though we're increasing the levy by 5%, if we even increase the levy over 5%, the tax rate would still go down because of that increase in valuation. That's that factor. You take your levy and you divide it by the net tax capacity. Last year, we ended up at 65% tax rate. When I started, we were close to 80% in previous years, back in the early 2010s. I think 88 was the top number that we saw because we had huge debt service levies. We're still recovering from the Great Recession, so we had some major impacts. So really, yes, we've seen a lot of growth in terms of expenses, especially on the wages side, but honestly, that's still the lingering effects of coming out of that recession and building up the staff to be able to do what it is that we need to be able to do, and do it effectively. And, the investments and requests that we have on the staff will help continue it, to get us there. And I think they're very well fit within the budget capacity that we have. So, however, I do caution, I do try to be future-oriented and think ahead. These increases that we're seeing on the valuation are definitely going to slow at some point. I mean, I hope they don't go into total recession times where you're going to see valuations really start to drop or plummet. I hope that they just kind of level off or go into very smaller incremental increases versus the 6 to 10% that we're seeing today. And that could happen. However, we work we're always lagging. We're always kind of focused, the valuations are always impactful for what the previous year's sales were. So we're always kind of going to be behind the 8 ball in terms of what the current today impact is in that market and what that effect has on the taxes. So to me, it would be prudent to not keep that levy down just because we can. I would rather see us take some of that opportunity to add to the capacity that we have in our current levy in this year so that we can make those investments in equipment, we can make those purchases and investments in staff that gives us the ability to, that in future years we have the ability to pull back the reins or make some cuts or not have to put off some investments into capital things because we don't have a pressing emergency need to buy huge major piece of equipment. And we have the capacity within our existing fund balances to maybe handle some of those things. Now is not the time to really pull back. Now is the time to kind of keep things moving in an incremental fashion so that when things do start to go down, we have the ability and flexibility to make those reductions without really impacting the level of service that we're providing. Going back to the start of this conversation, we are a service organization. We are providing services to the community, and the amount of money, resources that we put into that is going to directly impact the level of services that we provide. So, I think now is the time to make some of to make these investments. Yes, it's a 5% increase. It seems very big relative to what we've had in past years, but to me, I think it's right in line of where we are just in the current environment of everything. And you're going to see property, if your valuation stays the same or doesn't increase by 5%, you're going to see a reduction in your taxes for next year. So to me, I think that's the prudent decision. That's in the recommendation for what we have. But I always want to give you some flexibility to make some moves, but really on our part as all the department heads, and I want to give them a lot of credit. They worked very hard with me on putting together this budget and this request. I think we've put together really reasonable and effective ask for next year so that we can continue providing service in a better fashion and investing in the future of our community.
Council President?
Go ahead.
John, at the very beginning of your spiel, you said that thanks to the council that we've done well with the budget, and that's really very modest of you to say that. It's really thanks to John Rademacher and the staff, because you are the ones who put in the work. We just, and then you tell us and you explain it to us, and we say, yeah, good job, let's do it. So it's on you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Golf course fees.
Okay. So another, let's see here, try to swap out my screen sharing. So the golf course, and pains me to talk about it again. I want to give them a lot of credit. We actually had revenues this year for the golf course that vastly exceeded what we past years for total revenues. However, expenses were still much higher on that front. So we are experiencing on the operating side. We're going to experience another shortfall in terms of what we receive in revenue versus what we pay in expenses. That said, when we look at it from the accounting perspective or auditing perspective, we do have the golf equipment fund. We've dedicated revenue to going into that fund to make payments on equipment that we purchased or offset that. We did have more revenue coming into that fund than we had expenses going out. So we are going to see some benefit on that side. But looking forward, we still don't know with the development and plans that we're working on redoing the clubhouse and renovating the clubhouse, don't really know exactly what the outlook is going to be on whether we want to explore a contracting out for services for that clubhouse operation or sustaining it as in-house. We're not going to know really what that outlook is going to be, until the project is bid. And even then, it's not going to get constructed until potentially over the winter if things come in at the cost that we have the funds to pay for. So I am looking at next year making budget plans to operating it at continuing to operate it with the staff that we have and the staffing model that we have with a manager for the clubhouse that's not a full-time employee with benefits, but a seasonal regular employee, and then a head groundskeeper for the golf course. And we do have both Sherry Johnson and Ethan Ballou coming back in those positions respectively. That said, this is the department that, in terms of wage increases, is most affected by the existing market conditions because they're not benefited, because they're seasonal. They can, in the past, we've set the starting wage to be whatever the state minimum wage is, and this year, I don't believe that's going to be enough to be able to recruit the staff that we need to operate that facility. We actually did experience this in the spring. We had a cook hired, and ultimately that person didn't take the job because they were offered another position at $5 an hour more than what we were offering. So in order to offset the proposed increases that we have on those wage costs, I do have a proposal for changing the fees, both on the membership side as well as the greens fees. And I do have a pretty, I would call radical proposal, and that's to talk about youth golf. So one, we would make some pretty significant rate increases, and we try to simplify our rates. I know I was the one in the past and with Rich, that we came forward with proposals to have a residential rate and then a non-residential rate. Basically a little bit of a discount for those residents. Unfortunately, it's really hard to administer. If you live on Hilton Road, you could be in the city limits, out of the city limits for 4 houses, and back in the city limits, and you live on the golf course. Nobody would know the difference, whether you're in the city limits or not. That's not the only one, but a lot of and when we cycle in new staff each year and they're taking in these members and paying these green fees, they don't, know how to make sure to look up and ask, whether or not they're in the city limits or not. Most of the golfers don't even know. So to eliminate that, it was really a small break anyways, but that would simplify it. And then move to just basically a single rate and a couple rate. And then to say that youth, anybody under the age of 18 would be eligible for free golf. There is a program called Youth on the Course. If you pay, I think it's $30, and your course is a member of that, you could pay a $5 18-hole green fee if you wanted to play. To me, I think that'd be fine, but it's not even worth it for us to have to go through any of that hoopla or any of that for youth golfers. To me, I think it's an investment in our community. If you get people hooked on golf or at least exposed to golf when they're in their younger years, they're going to come back when they're older and capable to pay, and they're going to be future members for our course. And I think for us, that could yield some great benefits. The other thing we really needed to look at is the storage fees that we have for the private shed, that we hadn't really changed those rates much at all. I don't think we changed them in my time. We were $135 for if you had a gas cart, which is just pure storage, and then $185 if you had an electric cart, which used the electricity that we're paying for. So looking at raising those to $200 and $300 respectively for gas and electric, and then raising the trail fee as well. So that's the access fee for if you are if you bring your own cart onto the course, you can use that per year at $300. So then on the greens fee side, I know in earlier proposals, I think I talked about in my updates a higher rate. Looking at that and where we would land respectively, that would probably be a little too high, so we parse that back a little bit and trying to move to a little bit more, certainly more competitive. $20 for a 9-hole rate and $30 for 18 holes, and then the additional cart costs would be 15 and 10. So 18 holes with a cart, you pay $45. That seems to me as a golfer, that's a very, very good affordable rate for golfing. We have seen greens fees really actually increase in the last 2 years with COVID, and we actually increased our greens fee number more this year than the previous year. So those golfers came back and they stayed. Then I think that would be in line with where we need to be, and with those two changes or those changes on the membership side and the greens fee side, I think that really would set us in line for future years. So that is planned in this budget, and it does increase our revenue and actually gets us to the point where to balance the budgets between the projected revenues, and I've really honed in on these actual revenues and what they would come in based on the existing play, not projecting huge increases in the playing side, but I think we'd be at $25,000 short of revenue to expenses with those wage increases too, and back to that equipment fund, we had been supplementing that by $25,000 from the general fund to bring that up to bring it out of the hole. It is now it's accomplished that. It is now no longer in a deficit on the equipment side, but the deficit on the operating side has continued to increase. So this would, in my mind, I think get us to the closest we've possibly been in true numbers to where we can be in terms of balancing the revenue side on the golf course, and I think the investment into the clubhouse will get us to the point where our golf course can be operating in profitable capacity.
In the green?
Mr. President, I have just a couple quick questions. Now, on 18 holes, it says $30 with tax. Does that mean tax is included
That
in
means
the?
tax is included, yes. Yep, I wanted to define that as well, because the membership fees, there would be tax added on to that at the end. You know, it just goes into the accounting for it, because that sales tax does have to be collected, has to be paid, both the local options as well as the state sales tax.
Then one other, so on the storage fees, for a gas cart, are you saying it was 40 or 400 last year, and now it's going to be 200?
No, I don't know why there's a 4 in there. Oh, yeah. So last year, the rate structure was a combination of the storage and trail fee. So it was the 135 plus whatever that equals to, 265. So that equaled 400. So I'm changing just the resolution and the structures to saying trail fee is its own thing, storage is its own thing, whether or not you have a gas or electric. So it wasn't 400, that was that and the trail fee.
Okay, because then that was kind of the same thing with the electric. It looked like it was, was 450 and going to 300. I suppose the difference between electric and gas is electric cost with charging.
Yep, for charging their carts, and that goes through our meter, so we're paying the utility bills on that. I have been working with Dean Erdman to try to estimate what that cost is, and we didn't have that figured out in time for the budget presentation, but I suspect that the $100 difference might not be enough, but who knows? We'll get that.
Is it on a separate meter?
No.
So it's just going through the golf
Yeah,
course?
same, yeah, I
So,
think there's
I
only
mean,
one electric
The
meter.
only way
for
you
the
could
whole-
really drill down on that is if you were to put the power to the storage card on a separate meter.
What he's gonna do is test on outlet there, he has the means to test and see what the wattage and usage is on an individual cart charger, and we'll estimate from there.
Alcohol in parks, city code discussions. Craig?
Good evening, thank you. At our last park board meeting, we had a group that was talking about potentially donating a chunk of land for parks to the city of Little Falls, but they also wanted to look at alcohol use at the public parks. Currently in the city code, we do not allow alcohol in the public parks, and so that was something that the park board felt that we should consider. I wanted to get the council's take on it. And then from there, probably even bring it to the planning commission, if the council wants us to, bring it to the planning commission, get some more input in terms of adjusting that city ordinance. But wanted to open up for the council just to kind of get your take on what your feelings were for alcohol in the city parks and go from there.
I guess if you look in the trash cans, it's already there.
That was the exact discussion at the park board meeting. It's already there. People are already consuming alcohol in the parks. Why not make it legal?
Well, a question I would have, Mr. President, is if we make it illegal in the parks, what responsibility does the city take? Now, would we have to have a different insurance policy in relation to that, or what kind of responsibility are we going to assume?
That I don't know. Is Alyssa
I
on?
think Alyssa is on.
And Council President, Council, if there are different cities that do have alcohol consumption in the parks, you would have to, and we can certainly do this, contact the league insurance trust regarding the insurance provisions. But as far as general liability is concerned, it would remain the same as it is, with the exception of if it doesn't increase your liability, it may increase the chance of something happening, as alcohol often does, but it isn't going to increase your risk associated with that, which is already a fairly low, as long as you keep the park maintained properly and not in a negligent way. It wouldn't change that.
Yeah. Council President, In my previous city, we did have a park that hosted softball leagues, and we had a concession stand. What we would do is we'd actually approve a vendor that would carry the alcohol insurance and have the proper license to sell beer at that park during for the softball leagues. So it was something that we had it, and that was how we operated. Not saying that's exactly what the case is going to be in this
I think you
instance.
need a state catering license to be
They
able to do
needed
that.
the catering license to be able to do that,
Right.
yep.
But a lot of people just bring their own booze, and it's not allowed, but they do it anyway.
They do it over on the west side, I know, when they play softball, that was, everybody had coolers of beer and
So, Council President, another option that we have, like when we rent out the parks for an event, somebody rents a park, through the League of Minnesota Cities, they have what's called a Tulip Insurance, and it's basically a liquor liability that a property owner, or excuse me, someone who's renting a park can apply for this insurance. It's a liquor liability through the league, through the city. So, I mean, it's not going to prevent an individual who goes to the park from bringing alcohol and not having the insurance. But if they're going to rent it and have an event, we may want to consider, if they're going to have a wedding, a birthday party, a graduation, whatever it might be, we may want to consider that in that case that they would have to provide the Tulip, or they would have to do the Tulip Insurance because they're providing the alcohol for someone else.
Would that be just built into the cost then of renting it?
I don't believe so, because the cost can vary depending on what you're having and, those kinds of things, so they could apply.
I think we're talking about two different things here, though, aren't we? I mean, we're having events now where it's in parks, right?
But not a sponsored event, so like if I'm gonna have a graduation party at a park,
Right.
technically, I shouldn't be bringing alcohol there to give to other people who are attending the event. And it says that right on the form when we rent out the park, it says right on there that no alcohol is allowed. As opposed to other people that go to the park for the day or go for a period of time and bring a beer along for themselves.
Right. Right.
So
Just
if we're gonna open it up to
my opinion here, I
alcohol,
think, starting with the park board, maybe they need to have a little bit more discussion. Is it going to be all parks, certain parks? I mean, because I think there's certain parks where, why allow it? I mean,
Well, this particular
but then
park-
Maple Island Park, then I just picture somebody fishing for an afternoon, and what's wrong with,
Throwing the cans in the river.
having a cooler there, right? So,
I know the park board was thinking all parks, but if there are certain parks that we would like to restrict it to, that's obviously something that we would like to know as well.
And maybe certain areas in a park,
Well, that would be harder.
you just designate certain areas. Why is that hard?
somebody has to police
It's
it.
the policing of it.
Well, that's why it goes on now. You say there's some places where alcohol is in the trash cans and that, because there's no policing now, as far as that goes. I'm kind of in favor of having the planning commission look into it, like maybe certain areas, certain parks, things like that, but not just a whole park system.
I would agree with that, Mr. President. The point that Leif was making, as far as Maple Island, there's just Veterans Park, and they take beer there. I'd like to see us take a
The ball fields.
strong look at which ones it's really appropriate at. Softball, I know, I played for 40 years, and I don't think there was a night without beer at the ballpark. And I didn't know it until, I got on the council and I was told that. It's like, wow. Locked me up.
there's been a lot of them locked up.
Any other items or constituent messages?
Mr. President, just briefly, I can't wait until we get that program operating that's following citizens' complaints. I had a complaint by a resident of their rental, and it's been about a month now, and they have not seen any action when I talked to this person just this last week, and I think it's pretty sad. If there could be conditions that could be disastrous for the family, no matter what it is, I think, I don't know, my thought would be, we need to find a way to be a little quicker on the draw. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it takes that long everywhere where it's a month or 2 months, but, so I don't know what our real responsibility is, but I'll leave it at that.
It is 7:30. We'll adjourn our meeting and start our other one.
Except one minute.
Well, I'm going by the bottom of my computer. Okay. We'll call the Little Falls City Council meeting for December 6th to order. Let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All individuals are asked to either silence or turn off all cell phones, pagers, and other electronic devices that may disrupt the meeting. Approval of the agenda. Approve the agenda as posted in accordance with the open meeting law, and herein place all agenda items on the table for discussion. What is the wish of the council?
Move to approve the agenda?
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Lundberg, second by Councilmember Knopfler. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Approval of the minutes. Special work session meeting of November 15, 2021, and the regular meeting of November 15, 2021. Approve. What is the wish of the council?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Storley, second by Councilmember Liljegren. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Approval of the bills. Checks 105,868 through 105,950, totaling $1,169,628.88. Approve. What is the wish of the council?
I'll make a motion to approve the bills.
Second?
Motion by Councilmember Goshek, second by Councilmember Lundberg. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Awards, donations, presentations, and proclamations. We have none. Consent agenda, 2022 licenses, approve. Animal control report, November 2021, receive. Display of fireworks permit, Little Falls Lions Club, Little Falls Golf Course, approve. Economic Development Authority minutes, November 2021, receive. Legal fees, 2022, Flaherty and Hood, PA, City Attorney, approve. Public Works Report, October 2021, receive. Resignation of Doug Rocco, paid on-call firefighter, receive. Water Report, November 2021, receive. What is the wish of the council?
Mr. President, I move to approve and receive the items on the consent agenda.
Second?
Motion by Councilmember Hanson, second by Councilmember Lundberg. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Public hearings and lettings. Public hearings and informational meetings. Public informational meeting, budget and levy 2022. No action. John.
Thank you, Council President. Tonight is our Truth and Taxation hearing. In the work session, I gave much more depth to the conversation about what we have in this year's budget. I'll be a lot more brief in this. But,
Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of this we've talked about since the summer when we started this budget process. We had a larger scale meeting talking about the overall impacts, what we're experiencing in terms of needs for capital and equipment improvements. and investments that we needed to make on that. We've talked about a couple different positions in which we've looked at adding a position in the police department as well as one in administration. All those factors have been evaluated and brought into this budget. I think in terms of conversations of what's been a major change since we approved the preliminary budget back in September. Typically, we do this. We build out the estimated preliminary budget with the Public Works and Engineering departments fully budgeted that 100% of their costs would come from the general fund budget, which isn't in reality what we typically do. Because those departments can serve and do other work, like work in projects, work for other departments that aren't general fund, coming from the tax, property tax funding revenue. They can offset a lot of that expense. So Greg analyzes and looks at what he's got for projects next year, and next year's actually looking like it's going to be a pretty significant project year, very similar to what this one is going to be, based on the 4th Street Southeast work project that the county is going to be doing. We have infrastructure that we want to do alongside of that project, and then a number of the petition projects that we have. And I believe with 18th Street too. So there's a lot of time that they're anticipating that they'll be spending working on those projects, which can be budgeted off into those projects, which serves us really well. I think it's a good utilization of that funding. So that was another big key area of savings. You know, what we're going to see too is work comp has been an issue that we've talked about. That was another budgetary impact that this year we didn't anticipate because we didn't know that our experience rating was going to go up, as well as what League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust is experiencing going up too. So that overall is going to have an impact, and it is projected for within this budget. And so additionally, we have 3 different kind of sources of funds that we create that impact the budget for the city as a whole. Right now, what we have proposed is $14,133,000. Not all of that's going to come from the property tax levy. So some of those are going to be our enterprise funds, so that's the water, wastewater, garbage and recycling, storm sewer, and golf course. Those operate separately. They're more like business funds where they're getting money every month to run those and operate those departments. And they do pay back the general fund for services that we provide to them. So, effectively, we have a calculation that counts for my staff time, Lori's staff time, a lot of that administration part, so that they're paying for the services we're helping them provide, and the billing being kind of the biggest thing. We send out all the utility bills and collect that revenue. Well, 100% of the staff person's paycheck comes from the general fund, not from the water and wastewater. So we figure that calculation, and they pay it back. So it helps offset the general fund and the levy too, and still keeping those other funds in balance so we don't have to raise their consumption rate. So we are on the sewer side. I'm pleased to say that we have got those rates dialed in pretty well. We still have some estimates in terms of effect of the project and in operation. We haven't completed that all in all, but likely we're seeing that coming out really well. And the phase 2 part of, because there was 2 phases, the phase 2 part is very small relative to the $20 million total renovation, but that's still out there. We're looking at different options on the dewatering side to handle the biosolids when they're getting closer to the end product, but that's going to be small and still eligible for PFA funding, so that'll be really helpful for us to accommodate that cost. But in the end, what's really important for tonight's meeting is really the property tax levy, the final levy that we approve. So all I said, the total budget's $14 million. That's accounting for everything. The general fund budget is about half of that. That's about $7.2 million. And even within that, we get revenue from a lot of other sources. The largest one outside of the tax levy is local government aid. That's going to be about $2.8 million next year. So we factor in all the other revenue that we have. We take and add that against the expenses that we're projecting in the budget that come out of come out of the general fund, and then the difference is really what we set that levy number to be. So, so what we have in this budget proposed is a levy of $4,088,060. And then, so with that, that's all those other factors that I talked about, the increase in wages, the impact of work comp, the capital improvement investments that we've discussed. That rate or tax levy increase is 5.8% above the $3,862,000 we had last year. However, what we are seeing is an increase in taxable valuations, which leads us to a net tax capacity number. And the projection that we got from the county is that number is going to be close to 6.5 million. So what you do is to figure out your final tax rate is you divide your levy by the net tax capacity, and where 4,088,000 would be about 62.9%. Of a tax rate versus last year's 65.01%. So it's an actual decrease in the total tax rate, but what most people are going to experience is that their valuations went up. So they're going to see their valuations probably go up higher than what that reduction in the tax rate is, so they're going to see their property taxes likely increase. But the valuations going up is ultimately, hopefully a good thing. Hopefully it makes your property, your investment in our community more valuable. But those valuations going up are also probably a factor of new taxable value added to our community, either in improvements that are made to businesses and industry, and increase in building. So we have seen some construction that took place this year in terms of new home construction. In 2019, we saw a huge year in terms of overall construction, especially in improvements and renovations. So we're starting to see some of those impacts in terms of the taxable increase in valuation affecting our community in a positive way. So, as I said in the work session, I would be careful looking at this and saying, oh yeah, that's great, we have this increased capacity, but that gives us the room to maybe make some additional cuts and get our tax rates down. What we're seeing in terms of this increase is probably high, and we're seeing that happen, effectively coming out in the inflation that we're experiencing in our community, in this country. So those are going to cool in the future. And what happens for us in order to calculate that tax rate, we're kind of always a year behind, or maybe even 2 years behind. So when it gets to the point where those numbers sales start to soften and maybe even level out, hopefully they don't decrease like they did back in the Great Recession. We want to have the capacity and ability to affect that, make effective decisions that are going to help offset the taxes at that point. So, by keeping it level now and seeing, keeping us at a tax rate that's, pretty in line of what the previous year, and actually I'm just really positive that it's even a slight decrease, even at 5.8% increase. It gives us that flexibility in the future if we do have to make some changes. We want to make the investments in the capital things now while we have the capacity to do so, versus in future years when we don't. When we're trying to make cuts, that's not the time when we want to go and buy a $250,000 piece of equipment and we don't have the money to do it. So, so if we have the capacity now, I think it's a prudent, wise decision that we make that investments in our community now, and we can, give us the flexibility in future years. So, for us, I want to thank my department heads and the team that helped put this budget together. They were very influential in a lot of the work that went into it. I want to honor them in the requests. I don't have any recommendations or opportunities, I think, that I would even suggest in reducing any of that. The only areas that I think are left that we've talked about as in terms of discretionary decision-making is back to the band shell and the splash pad. Within this budget, we have allocated $100,000 to each of those items. So if it was something that you did want to see the levy decreased more of those two items, I think you have some capacity to do it. We have made some investments to that. We are going to end the year with the surplus this year, so we're going to, at the next meeting, we're going to have an opportunity to make a decision about where to put those surplus dollars. But to me, I think on the rest of it, we've really honed in as well as we could to what those numbers are, and I feel like they're well in line. They're conservative on the revenue side. We're not trying to over project revenue, and they're conservative on the expense side by saying, hey, we think it's going to be, we're going to estimate it's a little bit higher, so that again at the end of 2022 we can come back to you and say, hey, we have some surplus dollars. Let's make a decision on where to reallocate those funds. And that is all I have for this section.
Okay.
I know you probably anticipated me talking for another hour. Good.
I was just pausing a second because I was wondering here. And I also, as the reading says, it says public information meeting, but I have public hearing procedure in my packet, but this isn't the hearing, correct?
It is it's a public informational meeting, so we are required to take information or take comment from
comment?
the public during the meeting.
Yeah, so this would be the point where,
So if anyone would like to speak, we'd ask you to come up to the podium. You have 2 minutes. We need your name and address for the record, please. If anyone would like to speak.
Can you just do it from our chair?
Well, we prefer the microphone because
Yeah.
people are listening at home as well, and that way they can hear also. And we do need your name and address, please.
Molly Nelson, 19463 Haven Road,
Thank you.
but it's not pertaining to that property address.
Okay.
Does that matter?
No?
Okay. I guess my question is how do you guys determine the valuation of that increase? Because we own a lot of rentals in town, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, okay, I have one that went up $180. I have one that went up $42. I mean, and the market value is very different on all of these. So I guess my question is how do you determine that? And as a landlord, is this something that we have to continue to look in the future that this is going to happen to these? We want to keep our rents the same. We don't, it's hard for everybody right now. And when our taxes are going up 12, 16%, what are we supposed to do as landlords? And we're just trying to be a part of the community and have our tenants be able to pay rent and be happy. So I guess my question would be is where are you guys coming up with those certain figures per homestead?
Go ahead, John.
thank you. So the valuation of your property is done by the county assessor's office. They try to physically inspect every single property in the county every 5 years. So not every year are they going to be able to physically inspect a property and determine its close to valuation what they have. So then they base the remaining parcels that they can't inspect on a formula calculation that comes directly from the sales of property within Morrison County. They do look at different locations to modify that formula calculation. They do look at, I think, in ways different styles of property, higher end value versus lower end value. So they have their calculation. We don't know exactly what that is, but they're the ones that determine ultimately what your valuation is. In terms of if you don't feel that valuation is accurate, you will have the opportunity to appeal that. We have what's called the Board of Equalization. So they're
No, but we've done that
Yeah,
before.
so-
I guess my question, maybe I didn't say it right, was when I'm looking at the City of Little Falls portion of my taxes, how do you guys determine how much that goes up?
Yeah. So
Because
that-
they're all different on every single one of them.
Yep, so that factor is based on the valuation of your property. If it's homestead valuation, then you take that total taxable valuation. If it's homestead, you get a credit or you get a reduction in your valuation, and then you take that number by 1 and you multiply that by 1%. And then the 1% is multiplied by the tax rate of which I talked about earlier. That likely, if we approved it as it was presented, it would be 62.88%. So if you had $100,000 taxable valuation home, it would be $628.80. So that's how you calculate that rate. Now, what we do in order to determine what our levy is going to be, we take all of the expenses that we plan for the year that we're going to approve tonight. We subtract the revenues that we're projected to receive in terms of local government aid, fines, building permits, liquor licenses, different things in which we collect revenue, the transfers in from the enterprise departments, and then what the difference is that we need to collect for the levy, that adds to the levy. The additional things that are on there are debt service, so we have bonds for the projects that we've done in the past, and that's 1.1 million, and then we have 30,000 that goes towards.
John, I think you're getting into the weeds here. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I can simplify this. So we don't look at a percentage increase to your taxes. What we do is we set a budget, okay? And the county determines what the property valuation is, and then everybody pays their part of that budget based on the valuation. So the short answer is the amount, even though there's a listing that says this is going to the city, that's based off of the property value established by the county. So we don't go to an individual parcel and go, well, this person's paying this much, this person is, it's, for lack of a better term, it's all automatic. We set the budget based off the county's valuation. Here's your slice of the pie.
But I have one that is actually valued higher than a different one, and this one's more money. So that's why it's just confusing,
Does it?
I guess.
It's based on the classification.
Yeah, and the classification.
They're all non-homesteaded.
That was our main question. We have one here that's valued at 124,000.
And it went up
jumping
180.
180.
This one is valued at 132, and it went up 125.
So we got
So that's where it's just
1,000 more.
confusing. Like, if I could
Okay.
actually
Did
understand,
the valuations change?
both of them did, yeah.
Did any of
By
them
about the
change
same amount.
classification between, they didn't go from homestead into?
No, because we've had our rentals for quite some time.
Is there
So that's why it's just confusing.
Okay,
Yeah. And maybe we
I think
just-
what Councilmember Hanson said is probably the closest thing. The tax rate just gets applied to whatever the valuation is based on, and the valuation, your taxable capacity, your tax capacity is based on your classification too. So that's where he said homestead is 1%. I think non-homestead residential property is 1.25%.
Okay. I'm Chet Nelson, husband, same address. You mentioned that they all went up a certain percent, which is understandable, but the percents don't jive here. They're both non-resident. The one that is less value, we're getting charged more for. Do you have the equation for this? Because we can figure that out and come to the next meeting, possibly.
I would be happy to take a look at that. If you
Perfect.
want to share a copy with it, I can look at it and I can respond to you. I have Molly, I have your contact information.
Yeah,
I'm-
perfect. That'd
I'm
be
happy
great.
to look
Because the
into it
equations
because
are not jiving.
in
They just don't make sense.
in my experience, it doesn't make sense either.
Well,
but I
that's
don't-
why we had
I-
to bring them, because they're
Yeah.
both, I mean, they're both identical, straight across the board. Every one of these are rentals. This one's worth less, jumped up
12%, well, yeah, 180 for the city.
27% compared to this one. It doesn't make sense, and that's the frustrating part about it. I can understand taxes going up, but this just seems.
And to other, also, when we set that, and what the factor of that tax rate that's based on that preliminary number, we had that increase, that was 15%. So we've come down a significant amount. We've dropped the budget levy 10% since that time. So you're gonna see that final one come in way less than what that
Okay.
blue sheet. Your green sheet's gonna look a lot better by comparison next year. But I'm confused if your valuations
Yeah.
have one that's higher and actually ends up paying less in total taxes. That's,
We'll show you.
yeah, that doesn't make
have it.
sense to me.
And you can thank the state for, they make us send that one out to you.
Okay.
That isn't going to be the final.
Right.
Maybe they made a mistake and you should have raised the lower one higher.
The lower one is higher. That's our issue. That's the big issue we got going here. So in the future, when this goes up, cools in 2 years, like you say, values maybe plummet, maybe not. Are we going to see the same decrease in percentage that we've seen a raise for our taxes? Are they going to go back down?
So
Possibly.
what's going to happen is our budget, we would try to keep down. We would try not to have it go up as much, but we have other expenses that
Right.
impact what it takes to do that.
Yep.
And may not have additional revenues coming in to offset those expenses. But, that's where if we're making these investments now, then we don't have to, spend that, make capital improvements or investments in the future. So we can be nimble and we can make those adjustments
be
to
in the
help
green.
offset that. I can't tell you today in 5 years if we can make the same equivalent amount to lower
Oh,
it.
totally. I understand it's not a crapshoot, but you got your
I mean,
figures.
that's where
to
last
figure
year
out
we
what's gonna
really
go up.
did that in the budget work. We actually kept the levy to 0 intentionally because we weren't certain where things were going to end up. And we put off making some investments, which we're now replenishing this year. But it was part of that same conversation. If we do that then, when valuations, we weren't certain if they were going to go up, we do that, then, we might see some roller coaster of impact. But we want to keep it, the tax rate, try to keep the tax rate as stable as possible. We don't want to see it go way up. We don't want to see it go way down. We want to keep it pretty neutral. And right now, it's trending down.
Going way up.
Your ultimate taxes that were paid are gone up, but your rate did not.
Okay,
It will not.
cool. Final question. Can we just leave, or we got to stay for the rest of the time? Don't want to be rude.
No.
It gets more exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So,
Public information meeting, body worn camera and mobile video recorders, policy and survey results. Police Chief. Chief Shermers, please.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. Tonight, I'm before you to present to you the body-worn camera survey results and also to provide or allow for the community to give an opportunity to give input on a body-worn camera policy for its development. So first, I'll start with the survey results. Let's see here. The survey was posted on the city website and on the city's Facebook page and the police department's Facebook page. The survey ran from October 12th through November 30th. And a link was also created for the public to view and comment on the draft policy. We received 155 responses on the survey. So I'll go into the questions. The first question was, do you support a body-worn camera program at the Little Falls Police Department? Of those 155 responses, 145 said yes, 6 no, and 4 were undecided. If anybody has any questions to this, please ask.
As we're going through them, or wait till the end?
You can ask as I'm going through it if you have a question. Would the use of body-worn cameras increase community trust in law enforcement? The responses were 127 yes, 9 no, and 18 undecided. Do you feel that an officer would improve their behavior with the presence of the camera? 90 yes, 20 no responses, 45 maybe. Do you feel that if you were recorded by a body-worn camera, that you would have the right to view that video upon request? 134 responses were yes, 10 no, 11 undecided. Should an officer be allowed to view their own body-worn camera video before writing their reports? 83 yes, 43 no, 29 undecided.
I have a question on this one.
Yes.
Will they be able to view it before they write their reports? Because isn't a report really something based on something, could reviewing the body camera influence what they might have wrote in a report without seeing something?
It can influence your memory. There are a couple schools of thought whether you should allow an officer to view that camera footage first or not, because the way the statute is written, it really implies what did the officer perceive in the moment, not after the fact when, after they reviewed the footage and then wrote the report. So it can impact that. A lot of, some officers would have requested to review it first. In some cases now we use squad video, and they do review their reports on DWI arrests and stuff before they write the reports, and we have allowed that. Some agencies do allow it, some do not. And that's why we're here tonight, to decide, is that something we want to do, or is that something, that we don't want to do, so.
Do you have any information on if an officer reviews the footage on a body camera, has it affected the ability to prosecute on anything, or is there no data related to that at all?
I don't have any data related to that. I've spoke with agents from the BCA, and they do these investigations, and they say some agencies in Minnesota allow it and some do not. It's more of a community, what's the community's preference? Do they want their officers to view it or don't they? And some are very adamant they don't. Some are very adamant that they do. So, it's kind of one of those things where we have to make a judgment call and decide what path do we want to go.
Council President?
Yes.
Chief Schumer, may I interject something at this point?
Absolutely.
Just to clarify that from the prosecution standpoint, much as Chief Schumer said, we don't have any good data on whether this affects prosecution in cases or if it has affected prosecution specifically in Minnesota.
Thank you.
Well, we're not making that decision right now, right? It's just the results.
These are the results, yes.
Right.
And then we'll come up with a draft policy and make those decisions.
Because when it's something I'm not a professional in, I try to equate it to what I do know, and I'm an insurance adjuster.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine writing an estimate, which is basically my written report, and not going back and looking at my pictures or my videos.
Right. Yeah, so there are strong arguments in both directions for that. Do you believe that all police interactions with public should be recorded by a body-worn camera? 103 yes, 30 no, 22 undecided. Question 7.
Can
Yes.
we just go back to that? How much data would this take to record that much information? Would our network handle that amount of information?
We did plan for that, and the product that we're looking at would allow for that. This is going to be a process in development. I know, speaking with the State Patrol, they're, looking at doing a lot of recording, having the cameras on as much as possible, and that requires a lot of data, but there are a lot of instances where, even in those cases, you don't want those cameras running. I'll use an example. If we're on a death investigation, do we want those cameras running? Or, they're a medical, those are things we need to sit down, because we want to really respect people's privacy at the same time, so. Question 7, do you feel that the behavior of a suspect would be improved if a police officer was wearing a body camera? 65 yes, 55 responses no, 35 undecided. Question 8, do you believe that if you had been recorded by a Little Falls police officer with a body-worn camera, that any member of the public should have the right to view that video upon request? 15 yes responses, 56 no responses, 6 undecided, and 78 depends on the nature and location, and that's kind of what we were discussing. Some things maybe should be recorded and some things shouldn't, so. And then you have to deal with the classification of the data too, as squad video is classified one way, body-worn camera video is classified in another way.
I read that question differently, and I think it's a good question, actually. And I read this as, if I have an interaction with a police officer, can James Thorley then request that video? That's how I read that question. Not, if I'm recorded,
Right.
then I would be adamant that I get a copy of that record. If I have an interaction that's recorded and I want a copy, I should have that
Yes.
copy. So when you're getting into the policy, I think it needs to be thought long and hard about who can have access to that, and then if there's restrictions, how does that comport with FOIA?
And that's where the data is classified differently. So body-worn camera data is confidential, private data, and squad video can be released to the public in most situations, where body-worn camera video can be released to the subject of the data, and they can release it. If someone else requests it, they're not entitled to it.
Particularly if there's a death involved or a suicide or something, that not anybody should be able to say, hey, I want to see that.
Correct.
Side note, every week when I read the police reports, some of the entries in there, they have addresses and names, and I question whether that needs to be public record.
That specifically, call data is public. So addresses are public. Those specific items that we're releasing are classified as public data.
Yeah, well, in some cases, I think that's unfortunate then, when people haven't been charged and convicted of a crime.
I agree
yet.
with you.
It's there for eternity, but I digress.
Yes.
I'll let you continue. I apologize.
I appreciate the input. Question 9, do you feel that citizens should have an expectation of privacy while in their home, and that those recordings should be considered private? 56 responses were yes, 15 no, undecided 10, and depends on nature and location of the video, with 74 responses. Question 10, do you agree that Little Falls police officers should be required to have their body-worn camera on while inside someone's residence? 101 responses yes, 7 no, 5 undecided, with 42 depends on nature of call and location.
Wouldn't the last two both fall under what you just said, though? When it's a body-worn camera, it's confidential?
Yes. Question 11, have you reviewed the Little Falls Police Department's draft policy on the use of body-worn cameras? 56 responses yes, 99 no, and that was posted on the city website. And then there were several public or comments made through that survey. And, they're there for you to read. Most of them are generally positive.
Mr. President, I have one other question. In this survey, do you have any information on the demographics of, the ages or anything of these people that supplied, the 155 that supplied the information?
This was on SurveyMonkey, so it was just a survey that people could link to and complete it. I don't have any other data than that. It's completely confidential.
But is it for sure people from Little Falls, or could
I
it?
can't guarantee you that.
It could be from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Could be
Okay.
3 people. Thank you, and I don't think we have anybody that wants to make any comment, but if anybody does, now would be the time. We don't have anybody online, because they could take comment there.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a comment. According to our census, we've got, 9,000 people in Little Falls right now? Basically, something around there.
9,140.
How many?
9,140.
And to look at a survey that was put out there for a great length of time on a subject as important as body-worn cameras, and the police in our community, to have only 155 people out of 9,000 respond is pretty shameful in my book. I think the community needs to get a little bit more involved into what actually affects them, instead of complain when something happens and they had plenty of time to do input but never bothered to do it. That's just my opinion. I'd just like to share that.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Luddings, City Hall renovations and safety updates. Rice Lake Construction Group award. Greg.
Thank you, Mr. President. In front of you this evening, we have the City Hall renovations. This building here was built in 1932 originally as the water treatment facility. In 1974, it was converted over to City Hall. It's been that way for about 45 years. In our 2022 budget, we're planning on additional staff members being housed here at City Hall, and so we were looking at where areas that we could potentially have their workspace. And so it made us kind of look at, you know, the facility to see where everyone would be at, what safety improvements would be necessary. So if you recall in the current situation, the engineering side of the building, we really don't have anything over there as far as, you know, blocking out from the public. It's wide open. The hallways are wide open to the public. The administration side, we do have the safety glass there, but we'd also like to be able to have space for additional safety or additional staff members. And so we looked at what could we do to obtain all that. And one of the things that we came up with was basically turning that front window 90 degrees to be able to have additional staff members over there. That way, that also provides some additional safety for the staff down in the engineering department. By doing that, obviously that north access would be blocked off to the general public. So we'd be looking at putting an access here in the council chambers to go out and over to the parking lot. We did request quotes for that work from two contractors, Rice Lake Construction as well as Eagle Construction. Rice Lake was the low bid or the low quote on the project at $87,687. We are asking the council to move forward with that, and that would be charged to the equipment fund.
You don't want to move the engineering department down into the basement?
No.
Council President, if we did that, it would be vastly more expensive than $87,000 to meet the accessibility requirements of which we have to do when we engage in a major renovation like this.
What is the wish of the council?
I have a question, Mr. President. I know there's talk of moving some of our city facilities. What is the time frame that we're really, what are we really considering with some of these constructing and moving facilities? I just, is it worth spending, you know, $87,000 if we're going to be moving in a couple of years?
Council President, we are anticipating that, and we're working on proposals and discussion about how to engage in gathering the information that we need to do to assess what our needs are going to be for those additional facilities in the future. So that'll be having conversations with the police department about their staffing requirements and what they need in terms of a facility. That'll be having conversations with the fire department about what's the next piece of equipment look like if that expands, and what that, you know, the size of that is going to be and where that can fit within their existing structure. And that's having the conversation about what would we need in terms of for City Hall staff, for their engineering department, for the administration department of what we need. And that process, I mean, should take some time. And we're talking about making a major investment in terms of a new facility like City Hall, like expanding the fire hall, and like you know, reconstructing or moving the police department. So to me, I think in my head, it takes about a year at least of that conversation. Then you go into design options, and then you're going to vet those design options in terms of which one is actually feasible. and then you're gonna take that out to bid and you're gonna construct. So best case scenario, 3 years, I think potentially up to 5 years, before, you know, you make that decision and you're inside of a building. What we need in terms of the space for admin, we've looked at what we have. There are some other alternatives. They're not good in terms of redoing this spaces and making, adding space or making different office room available for an additional staff person in City Hall. So that on top of I'd say the inefficiencies of what that creates, on top of also the safety factor. We had a safety audit completed on this facility back in 2017 or 2018, which is what led us into the glass in the first place. And we got a grant to do that. But one of the other biggest areas of vulnerability was actually this room. It was actually the outlay, you know, how this room is set up, and in terms of if you have an active shooter, if you have a situation in terms of emergency exits, where do we go? We have that direction and that direction, and if you are coming in here with a weapon, you're you know, you've pinned a lot of people down, and we have no other place to put them. So the safety aspect to this was another consideration of why we wanted to do it. I agree. Like, I am not one to want to spend money and see it wasted. However, you know, we had that conversation, and in terms of what we need immediately and what we're going to get eventually, I think the time, the investment in that now would be well suited for this upcoming year. Furthermore, we have been reserving dollars for City Hall for other improvements that we're not going to end up making. We're not going to reinvest huge money in the floors. We're not going to reinvest huge money in windows in the future. We've been saving that up, and I believe, Lori, we have the capacity with those funds that we've saved up over time to make this investment. So it isn't like we're having to tax more money to pay for it. We have the funds there to do this.
Are we having the discussion before we even vote on this, or?
Well, normally we would have a motion and then discussion, but
That's
that's
what
not
I'm
the way it
saying.
wound
I
up.
was kind of waiting for that, but I guess it's done.
Was that a motion, Frank?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion.
We had it.
Well, there might be more.
Been there, done that.
You were talking about at one point using that door, but now there's, just so we know, there's something new with.
I think it's more costly. We evaluated it. It was more costly to do that direction than it was to do this direction.
Yep, so they'd be looking at
When
one
would
of
this
those.
come out?
One of these old windows?
What that, yeah, we'd open one of them. Yep, because there were windows that were filled in
Oh, I
at one
see.
point. So those would be taken out, and then it would be basically all the way down to the flush with what's there now, and that's where you would exit out.
We just cut a hole in the floor and all jump down?
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Transfer pump, Thompson Pump Award. Greg.
Good evening. So in 2021, this year, we did budget $70,000 for a transfer pump. If you recall, in 2020, Anderson Lake was rising. We had a request to look at some options to lower that water levels over there. As we started looking at options, it became evident that in the event of an emergency, we really don't have anything that transfers large amounts of water. We live right next to the Mississippi River. We have stormwater pipes that daylight actually under the water level. And so when we started looking at Anderson Lake, it kind of highlighted that we really don't have anything to move water in the event that we needed to move water. We ended up renting the City of Pillagers. They have a transfer pump that they have that also does some dewatering capabilities. But it became evident, you know, with our waste plant in the river right here that we probably should have something for moving a large amount of water. And that's why we budgeted that $70,000. We did reach out to Thompson Pump. It's a very similar pump, actually same brand, a little different model just because of the age as what Pillager has. And so they gave us a quote of $65,665. This is off of the Sourcewell cooperative purchasing bid. The nice thing about this particular one is that the Pillager has two sets. They've got the ability to transfer water from one spot to the other, and they also have equipment that will dewater if you're doing utilities. So they've got sand points that you can put down. The $65,000 is just for the transfer portion of it, but in the event that we needed to use the well portion, we would be able to use that from Pillager, probably at a cost, but that's not that big of a deal, to be able to use that and still dewater that portion of the ground in the event that we're putting in utilities for our project. So the two will be able to work together, which is nice, gives us a little bit more flexibility. We did budget this, like I said, $70,000, half from the equipment, half from the waste improvement funds. So that's what we're looking at. We're asking the council this evening to approve the purchase from Thompson Pump out of Port Orange, Florida, in the amount of $65,665, and that would be charged equally to the wastewater as well as the equipment funds.
What is the wish of the council?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Mayor Zilka, second by Councilmember Goshek. Any discussion?
Yes, really quick, Mr. President. Just food for thought here. You got half equipment, half wastewater. I know it's a small fund, but shouldn't some of this maybe be applied to stormwater?
Potentially. Lori, what's your thoughts?
I mean, we can.
Just an idea. It's, I mean, it came up because of Anderson Lake, which I would consider the whole thing to be stormwater, basically.
Charged to stormwater, yes. Yep, you're right.
Mr. President, how much did it cost us to rent from Pillager?
Do you remember?
I believe that's the one they got through Innovation
Yes.
Fund.
Yeah.
So the dewatering pump and transfer pump that Pillager had, if you recall, we have our sewer camera that we were awarded through the innovation funding grant from Sourcewell. Pillager was the same project, so it was probably a very low cost rental. That was a function of those innovation funds, was that you would have very minimal rent, just cover some wear and tear on that so that it could ensure that it's coming home.
Plus, we'd be dependent on if they're using it or not too, so.
True.
I would say, and likewise, if we're impacted in an emergency situation to moving water, a lot of other communities are probably in the same situation that we are.
Yeah.
That is going to be in pretty high demand.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Old business, Resolution 2021-88, 2022 levy, adopt. John and Lori.
All right, Council President, if I may, just ask for a quick consideration for the totals. When we are presenting the budget, and I don't know if I have the most up-to-date form, but I know when we were putting together resolutions last week, in the packet, there was a small change at the end, and the number that I have in my workbook is different from this, as well as I want to have a conversation and impact about if there is any other additions or subtraction, well, really deductions that the council would want from the levy. I think in terms of the bonding, economic development, fire relief, parking, those are all stable. It's really going to end up in that general fund number, and I can bring up the spreadsheet to verify what that final number is going to be.
I think I agree with what you said earlier, though, is if we build into those things a little bit in a year that's better, a year that's not requiring cuts or holding the line, it helps to make those years better when you do need to do that.
John, how does the county's net tax capacity of $140,000 increase affect?
Yeah, that actually took the rate down from it was like virtually the same, 65%, I think 65.08%, down to the 62.89%. So that was the impact of that change. Because I know when I sent information to you in advance of this, and, you know, it was basing off of, when I got my truth and taxation statement, I was able to reverse calculate what that total amount is, and, you know, it's.
You're probably one of the only people that looks forward to getting that in the mail.
It's part of my work, so.
Yeah, the 2953060 is what's in here.
Why is that different? Why is this one different? Why do I get 488? And that's. Well, this is that 900 increase. I must not. It's not this. Mustn't miss this up at all.
Well, it shouldn't, the total didn't change.
While you're doing that, I was going to bring up something. I'm in favor all the time of parks, splash pads, band shells, and everything. My question was, if we take that off, that would lower our levy. Would there be a possibility that if we had discussions on where to use the surplus from last year, if that could be applied to that?
That is absolutely a factor that could be utilized, I think. Because in terms of what we could utilize the surplus dollars for, balancing, you know, in the past, we've balanced the golf. We've also paid down some of the zoo improvement fund balance. Those two are really left, the only two left still that are in deficit for funds that we operate with. The only other ones that I really know of are project funds. But that's standard. They operate in deficit, and then they get their debt service, and then that gets paid back over time. So I think there's capacity to do that. What our final surplus number is going to be, I would say, I'm hard pressed to give you a firm number. It's going to exceed 100,000. I don't think it's going to be over. I think we'll get at least 100,000, but I don't think we'd get over 300,000. So, you know, I don't think we have the whole 200,000 to fund for both of them if we really wanted to offset the levy for that year, but there's going to be something.
And if we take them two items off, it'd push us closer to zero?
If we took those two items off, we would be at about $25,000 over last year's budget.
Okay.
We had that discussion at agenda planning.
And then the tax rate projected would be between 59 and 60%.
Mr. President, if I may, I guess I'm for leaving those allocations in there in the budget. I know we had a few members of this body going back a couple of years that were very adamant that we weren't investing enough in our kids, and now I'm not hearing that. So I'm kind of perplexed by that, but I think leaving it in there shows that, you know, we're getting some amenities for our kids seriously.
Agreed.
That wasn't what I was talking about. My question was if there was a potential of taking some of the surplus. My thought was maybe lowering on this towards them to splash pad and the band, and then yet having an option to maybe.
But the argument has been made, I don't disagree with, the argument has been made before that when we're looking to cut, it's always those things that are coming off first.
I should also add, Council President, and in our meeting last year, we actually did reduce. We took out all of the money, I think, for splash pad and kept in just 50,000 for band shell in order to keep the levy at zero.
Yeah.
So we don't have more than 50, we only have 50,000 for a planned allocation for this year. So when we make those transfers based on the budget, like, until we are told by the council to do something differently, we are planning on only putting that 50,000. So, you know, we would have, so we're kind of, in this year right now, that's all that's planned. So we do have the surplus money, and that was kind of, I think, if I recall back to the discussion, we we're hopeful that if there was surplus, we can bring it back and make that a priority to refund that. But by also then again taking it out next year, you know, you're putting at risk of just waiting for the surplus money as well.
Mr. President, there's also been talk of the splash pad in the local option sales tax, correct?
If that's a part of the final design in the project area with the recreational complex, then yes. In terms of what also we heard with the water study, that might be a factor to assist in the water study or the water utilization area. You know, that was a benefit, and that is not in an intended or even talked about final location for that recreational complex.
I know that was a large part of the discussion when we first started talking about the local option sales tax, and it's carried over from year to year. So I think the residents might be surprised if it wasn't, but at least if we're building funds to make sure that we could achieve that even without the local option sales tax.
It would certainly be supportive even, yeah, in addition to local option sales tax to have that revenue.
Mr. President, yeah, that's what I was going to kind of bring up too, is I'd like to see it stay in there, but I also want to see some action taken on that where we can start moving forward with some. I mean, we've been talking about splash pad for ever since I've been on here, and yet nothing, you know, so I'd like to, I'd like to see some action being taken to move forward with that.
Well, and that's my point to why we should keep it on there. I mean, we can't hang our hat on the local option sales tax going through, and I think we need to keep moving forward. In the event that doesn't happen, we still have some funds there to move forward, but I think we need to wait for that election before we push, you know, before we break ground on it.
And I think having money in there is going to help. You know, last time there were people were going to donate certain things, like one outfit was going to put up the restrooms, donate it and stuff, but we didn't come up with enough money to do the whole project, so it kind of bailed out. This way, if you have something like that and then somebody does want to donate, it looks like a more sure thing, and they're more apt to go through with it, so.
Maybe we could keep it in there and put the surplus in there, and get her done.
Well, I think we can have that discussion when we know what the surplus is. Then we can decide where to apply it.
What is the wish of the council?
So I just want to.
You have more.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to add, in the resolution document, the subtotal is off, and the total are off by $900. That was the minor adjustment. The general fund numbers stayed the same, but when you add those up, it's $900 short of where it should be. So the subtotal should read $3,088,060, and the total is $4,088,060.
Or we can keep it where it is and make you find $900 somewhere.
No, I think we can find it.
Reserves.
I didn't jot that amount down. What was the?
It's 4,087,160 would be the total levy.
4,087,000.
160.
One's.
06.
06. I was going to say that doesn't come out to 900. Okay, so With that adjusted figure, I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-88, the 2022 levy.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Hanson, second by Councilmember Storley. Any discussion? Call a roll, please.
Knopfler.
Yes.
Liljegren.
Yes.
Lundberg.
Yes.
Zilka.
Yes.
Hurkak.
Yes.
Storley.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Gushik.
Yes.
Carries.
Resolution 2021-89, 2022 Housing and Redevelopment Authority Levy. Adopt. Lori.
Yes, this resolution would be adopting the HRA levy. We are by statute able to levy a percentage of the taxable market value, which calculates out for 2022 to be $101,000.
What is the wish of the council?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Knopfler, second by Councilmember Lundberg. Any discussion? Call a roll, please.
Liljegren.
Yes.
Lundberg.
Yes.
Zilka.
Yes.
Hurkak.
Yes.
Storley.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Gushik.
Yes.
Knopfler.
Yes.
Carries.
Resolution 2021-90, 2022 Budget and Capital Improvement Plan. Adopt. John or Lori?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. So this is adopting the final numbers, and these are correct. So there is no adjustment for what was approved in the levy.
What is the wish of the council?
I move to adopt Resolution 2021-90.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Lundberg, second by Councilmember Liljegren. Any discussion? Call a roll, please.
Lundberg.
Yes.
Zilka.
Yes.
Hurkak.
Yes.
Storley.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Gushik.
Yes.
Knopfler.
Yes.
Liljegren.
Yes.
Carries.
Vacate portions of rights-of-way, Country Club Edition. Approve. Greg and Lori.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have two resolutions in front of you this evening, and I'll talk about both of them kind of at the same time. 2021-79A actually rescinds Resolution 2021-79. In that particular resolution, we only had Block 5 when we described the property. And so 2021-79B includes Block 2 as well as Block 6 as well as Block 5 in that portion of it. So when we wrote the legal description, we only had a portion of that legal description in there. So we included the remainder of it. We talked about it at the public hearings as well as the notifications to the folks. It's just it got missed when we finished the legal description. So this evening we would ask that you approve both of the two resolutions. Like I mentioned, A rescinds the one that we previously did, and B updates it to include Block 2 as well as Block 6 and Block 5 as it should be in the legal description.
What is the wish of the council?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2021-79A to rescind and Resolution 2021-79B to adopt.
Second.
For both?
Second for both, yes.
Any discussion? Call a roll, please.
I will call the roll for 79A first. Zilka.
Yes.
Hurkak.
Yes.
Storley.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Gushik.
Yes.
Knopfler.
Yes.
Liljegren.
Yes.
Lundberg.
Yes.
Carries. And 79B, which is the new corrected resolution. Hurkak.
Yes.
Storley.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Gushik.
Yes.
Knopfler.
Yes.
Liljegren.
Yes.
Lundberg.
Yes.
Zilka.
Yes.
Carries. Thank you.
Public Works Vehicle, amend City Council motion November 15, 2021. Approve. Greg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Getting vehicles has been a challenge this year. So at our November 15th meeting, we approved the purchase of 4 vehicles. When I went to order the 4 vehicles on the 16th, I found out that Ford had inadvertently had an error in their purchasing price with the state of Minnesota. It only happened on the Super Crew, the Super Cad, where we ordered 3 of them, that was corrected. But the Super Crew, there was the one we ordered, they had an incorrect price on that, and so they did amend the prices that morning. It was another $2,011, so we're asking the council to approve the amended purchase price of $37,667.36. That would be with Boyer Trucks out of Minneapolis, and that would be to the equipment fund.
What is the wish of the council?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I'll second it.
Motion by Councilmember Liljegren, second by Councilmember Lundberg. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. New business, petition, streetlight, Weston Circle, receive. That's the wish of the council.
Move to receive.
Second.
Is it dark out there?
That's all we need to do, correct? That's correct. Resolution 2021-91, establish golf fees, 2022, adopt. John.
Thank you, Council President. As we discussed in the work session, these are the proposed golf fees. It is a significant adjustment to what we've had in the past. We've consolidated a few of the items, eliminated that, as well as this does eliminate the fee for youth golfers. So we are raising the couple rate closer to what the family rate would be, which included an dependent under 18. But for golfers under 18, we are proposing that there are no, in this resolution, there is no charges for them for membership and or greens fees.
What is the wish of the council?
I'll move to adopt Resolution 2021-91, establishing golf fees for 2022.
I'll second that.
Motion by Councilmember Storley, second by Councilmember Lundberg. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. John, I was just going to ask, do you have a sounding board for some of this? We disbanded the golf board because they couldn't get a quorum. I'm just wondering and I'm asking because it's not $25, $30 on some of these. I get dropping the discount for city residents because I saw in action how that was going in there when people were trying to purchase theirs. I mean, how is somebody running the bar and getting out green fees? How are they going to know what's in the city or not? So I'm okay with that, but this is a pretty big jump. I'm just asking, do you have a sounding board, executive committee for Canadian Cup or the golf board? I just think some input on this wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, my discussion was really with Sherry, and based on what we needed at the time to make those adjustments to get revenue to pay for those increase in wages on the golfer side.
Because we run a risk. I mean, that math might be simple math, but then again, if you chase a few away, that they elect because of the increase this year, well, we're not going to do the couples, then we're losing out there.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I get the sense that a lot of costs are going up in a lot of areas. We didn't do much of an increase at all. We don't think we actually increased anything between 2020 and 2021. We're still very competitive and very reasonable in terms of our overall rate structure for what it costs to play golf here.
Yeah, two things jumped out at me when I went down on this. I didn't see a listing for Canadian Cup only membership.
Yes, that's an oversight on my part. I'm sorry.
And it looks like we're totally dropping the senior membership rate.
Correct.
Yeah, Mr. President, I'm kind of on that same line. I'm a firm believer in what's in the till at the end of the day and not what comes out of individuals' pockets. But the other question I have is on the under 18, is there going to be, for no cost, is there going to be any requirements on that where they have to be accompanied with an adult, or is it, how will that play into scheduling green time, or times and all that stuff?
That, having, scheduling when they can play certainly should fall into the same greens fee time schedule that we have. There is I need to go over this with Sherry, but there is the ability for our members to make tee times and not have to go through the payment side of that transaction, so they can, there's abilities for members to make those and reserve those times, which should happen as well with the 18-year-olds. So, it's basically, we could take that membership information for that youth and just apply it in there, and they could, reserve those times as well. I'm there frequently, and I haven't experienced a time in which youth that are playing are taking up prime times for green paying customers. Now, certainly could have an impact. When we say and advertise, oh yeah, kids under 18 are free, well, hopefully a accompanied adult would be coming when they're coming on the weekend too. But we did see I witnessed a lot of youth golfing during the week. They were just members or parts of family members playing a lot of golf, not accompanied. They'd be out walking. High school team members, they play on the course unaccompanied by people over 18. So it's a balance. There's certainly challenges with that, and it's a consideration. I do want to say, we do have the ability to discuss this at the next meeting. I don't think that this fee schedule has to be approved in tonight's meeting. Granted, we did just complete the budget piece, and it is assumed in that budget, but there are some elements of this that we could discuss in terms of the overall impact.
Well, my concern was I played behind a group of, I would say, maybe 13, 14-year-olds of 5 or 6 people. It kind of slows things up.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there was any look at, okay, if you're up to this age, you must be accompanied with an adult, maybe 15 to 18, maybe not so, but.
That we could set as a rule and policy outside of this fee schedule. But operationally, one of the elements that we are working on, I've had conversation with Ethan, is having a person doing ranger activities, monitoring groups and keeping them on time and making sure that they're following the course rules when they're out there. So that we are working on and trying to identify as a position for next year as well.
I had just a couple things. Would it be free all day, because some kids will just sit there all day long?
We already do.
Keep jumping in, and that would really put a twist in the whole thing. And the other thing is, what's your policy on age for renting out carts?
16.
16, okay. So they have to have like a driver's license, and makes sense.
We have a motion by Councilmember Storley, second by Councilmember Lundberg. Call the roll, please.
Storley?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Butchick?
Yes.
I didn't answer, but
Only answered twice.
yes.
I said yes,
I'll
too.
start over. Storley?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Butchick?
Yes.
Knopfler?
Yes.
Liljegren?
Yes.
Lundberg? Yes. Zilka?
Yes.
Burkhardt?
Yes.
Carried.
And I will add, I did, yes, you're right, Canadian Cup is not in there. It was in my budget planning, and that was going up by $25, I think, to $400 from $375. Or, $375 from $350.
City council reports on city authorities, boards, bureaus, commissions, and committees. Does anybody have anything?
Mr. President, I just briefly report of the event we had out at the airport. There's a lot of people there, and it was thanking Congressman Stauber and his staff for the support that they've given the airport. I know, Greg, we were talking about how many years we've been working on that crosswind runway, and nobody dated back that far except for Don, and he couldn't remember. So it's been a long time, and it was great to see all that activity there, and it goes back to what John said during the meeting about having that pilot training out there, that instructor, that place is really jumping out there quite frequently.
We have, John, a meeting for Camp Ripley Veteran State Trail here at 6 o'clock. I was going to ask Greg if you would be interested in coming. There's a lot of questions where Little Falls is at this, and they're really concerned, like, where our next allotment of money is going to be spent, so we need to know how that works in with Little Falls here. So if you could attend, it'd be nice.
I thought you were going to try to line up the key.
Yeah, I'd like to get a key, but
That's why I said maybe, if you can get in. Announcements or other announcements? Otherwise, we will adjourn at 8:51.